We're in a devotional series where we're meditating on 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 3. And I hope you have been memorizing that. That was my challenge last week, that one of the great things that helps us in meditating on a verse is to memorize the verse. So let me ask, did you memorize 2 Peter 1:3 last week? If not, let me challenge you to try to do that this week. But why don't we try saying it together right now? 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 3. His divine power has given us everything required for life and godliness through the knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. Well, last week in our meditation, as we're learning to meditate on this one verse, just using this as an example, we focused on His divine power. And this week we want to move on to the next phrase, His divine power has given us. And just that one little phrase that at first really doesn't seem like much. It seems like, well, that's just a connector between His divine power has given us everything required for life and godliness. Well, we'll look more at everything required for life and godliness next week. But this week we want to think about has given us. Because if you stop and think about that one little phrase, those three short words, has given us, there is a wealth of information right there, some incredible truths about God that are really very important and very striking. Because if you think about it, it is giving us the very idea that God, the creator of everything that exists, that creator, that awesome, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing God, the most powerful being that exists, wants to give something to me. He wants to give to me and to you. It's not just a generalized idea of, well, just kind of out there for everybody, which that is true. But we always have to remember that God is a very personal God, a very intimate God. And though He is great and awesome and all-powerful, all-seeing, all-knowing, He also is very personal. And when we think about that one phrase, has given us, we come back to that idea, God, that huge, awesome, great God wants to know me, wants to give to me. Well, let's think about that for just a minute. What is it that God wants to give to us? Well, I think when we really get down to the basics, the essence of what that is all about, it's a lot more than what we'll look at next week. Next week we're going to look into, He has given us everything required for life and godliness, and that's important. But there's something even more foundational before we get to those things that we need to recognize. And I say that foundational idea takes us back to the very beginning of the Bible. Because if you go to the beginning of the Bible and look at the beginning of all that exists, all creation, when God just spoke the words and creation began leaping into existence, when God created man, notice what it says in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, and the whole earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth." So God created man in His own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. You see, we are created in some way to be like God. We are created to reflect God and to reflect His characteristics to the world, but also at the time that we are taking care of the world, that we're using the things that are in this world that God has put there for us, but that we also manage them well. And that's a whole other story altogether. But the heart of this means that when God created man in His image, it means that God created us. He designed us to live in a relationship with Him that nothing else in all of creation is created in the same way. Only mankind is described as being created in God's image. Now, the sad part about that is that though God created us to be in that relationship with Him, to reflect Him to all the world, we've messed that up. We have each sinned, and that's something that every single one of us has to struggle with. We have all failed God and have broken that relationship. And through that, we have distorted, we have marred that image of God in us. But here's the good news, that God, because we read many verses like, His divine power has given us. When we read things like that, it reminds us that God seeks us. He comes to us because He wants to give us that identity. The identity of being His, of belonging to Him, of reflecting Him to this world. And so the good news is God seeks us. He comes to us. He offers us an opportunity to be forgiven of our sin and to live in that relationship with Him. So when I come to that one little phrase, has given us, I just think back to, wow, that means that the great and awesome God Himself is seeking me because He wants to know me in a relationship. And that is something worth living for. Thank you so much for joining me today, and may God bless you.